Hello. So I just wonder, have you ever been driving through like a mountainside and had to go into one of those tunnels? You know, the ones that they burrow right through the mountain to save us time so we don't have to drive over the mountain or around the mountain. And yet, there's just miles and miles of darkness in this 2-lane highway. Have you ever been in one of these? I have. So has my guest, Sabine Schoepke, who is on today. And we were talking about how, disarming that can be. It's a little disconcerting. You're not quite sure, when the 6 miles is going to feel like it's coming up and you see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're just in the tunnel and you have to just trust that, they engineered this. It's going to be okay. They wouldn't be letting us go in and out of this thing unless we can get out of this thing. Well, during our conversation today, Sabine brought this up, and it was such a great analogy for what it's like to be in midlife. Only, you know what? As you enter this tunnel, you don't know it's going to be done in 6.5 miles. You just don't get to know, right? And it can feel really off-putting, really disorienting to be in the midst of all of this change. Know that there's an end. Know that there's something on the other side of this. But, sometimes we get caught up in it, right? Sometimes it feels like maybe there isn't an end to this adjustment period and that we're just out of whack. That might be more of the midlife crisis side, right? Well, here, I want to help you move from midlife crisis to a centered life thriving. So my guest today, Sabine Schoepke, has so many really great pieces of wisdom that you're just going to walk away with from today's podcast feeling lit on fire. But I'll name right from the get-go, she's been reinventing herself since her early adulthood, really, honestly, since she was 19. So she's got a leg up on all of us, and I want you to use that to your advantage. Listen carefully to the wisdom that she has for you today, because she's been reinventing herself since she was 19 years old, she really has some valuable pieces of information that will help you shift from a midlife crisis level of being in the middle of your tunnel to feeling more centered, more like I can trust this process and I know that there's going to be light at the end of this. So please join us and keep listening. Welcome. This is Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice-divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. Today's guest is a real treat and a real powerhouse. Sabine Schoepke is not just a master at helping midlife professionals reinvent themselves. She's a powerhouse of clarity, confidence, actionable steps, momentum, and success. As a seasoned business and life coach, an engaging best-selling author and speaker, a dedicated podcaster, and a dynamic multipreneur, Sabine embodies the spirit of transformation. But that's not all. Sabine also stands tall as a bodybuilder, showcasing her commitment to not just mental and emotional strength, but physical prowess as well. Her mantra, clarity changes minds, changes lives, is not just a catchphrase. It's a lived experience. Sabine's life story is a testament to the power of a clear mind and a strong mindset. From navigating the complexities of being a serial entrepreneur to the challenges of raising twins as a single mom, her journey has been nothing short of extraordinary. So let's welcome Sabine. I really appreciate your being on the podcast today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm out of my home as well, my
Yeah,
new little home
new
in
little home.
the German Alps.
Are you on my mailing list yet? Because if you're not, you really should be. You want to join at learntoloveyourstory.com. If you scroll down, I'm giving away a freebie for you. Honestly, you know what it is? A free course. I sell online courses, but this is a course just for you. And it's about freeing yourself, letting go of what others' expectations and ideas are for you. You know, that nagging self-doubt in your head, it's usually fueled by your consideration of what others think of you over your consideration of what you think of you. And so I teach you in my video all about what is underlying that kind of self-doubt and how to get out of that conundrum. And I give you a workbook that goes with it that helps you to build the skill sets that you're going to need for that. So please make sure you're on my mailing list, because at the least, you're going to get a free gift. And at the most, you're going to hear about all the things that we're doing on Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving and learntoloveyourstory.com. And you don't want to be missing out on any of the new things that'll be coming your way. My first question for all of my guests on the Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving podcast is, tell us your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Sabine.
So I'm originally from Germany. I left Germany when I was 17 on my own. I went to Canada. I went to school there, and then I was supposed to go back to Germany, but I didn't want to. So I was on my own, very young, and I was actually homeless for a little while. And I started my first company out of that situation, out of sitting on a park bench in Toronto and saying, now what? And so that was my first kind of reinvention I had at very young.
Very young. How old were you at that time?
At that time, I was 19.
Wow. I mean, yes, that's a lot of ingenuity that early in our life, right? Yeah.
And that was kind of the beginning of, my entrepreneurial sequences. I've had multiple companies in my life. I've lived in different parts of North America. And then last year, I decided to sell my latest company, and I wanted to come back to Europe I was ready. I was just ready for a change. My kids had finished high school. My daughter moved to Switzerland to go to school there. So did my son for a little while. And I was like, empty house. I'm like, you know what?
Wow.
I kind of hit a wall, and I said, no, what am I going to do? And it was really my daughter who was the one who said, Mom, the world's your oyster. Do whatever you want to do. You're free. You can do whatever you want. And so for me, it was clear. I was like, you know what? I want to sell my business. I want to do something completely different. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I also knew that I didn't need to have all the answers. I could just take one step and see where it was going to take me. And so I sold my business, I sold my house, I sold all of my belongings. And on December 31st, I got on a plane with 2 suitcases and said, and now let's start over.
Wow. So just this past December 31st. So you
6 weeks
fresh
ago.
have started
fresh.
over.
Yes.
That's amazing though. And thank you for sharing, because your story is so, for the population that you and I work with, people in midlife, it's so common that we kind of hit this mark where the way we've been doing things, it like just falls off, naturally. Kids age out, right? They move out, they go become awesome adults because that's what we trained them to do. And then turn around with such wonderful wisdom. Although if you had wisdom at 19 to restart your life, I understand why your daughter had that wisdom for you, I'm sure. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's real, having to start over again. How are you doing? How has that been so far?
There's a lot of little bumps in the road that luckily I didn't anticipate, because it probably would have scared me. A lot of the stuff I didn't know. I didn't know how difficult it was to come back to Germany. Like, I am still German. I have this German passport, but still to come back into a country where you haven't lived for over 35 years is very difficult.
Yeah.
Just the bureaucratic things like getting health insurance, buying a car, getting, like a tax ID number. It's very different than the US. I feel like North America has been really good to me of like, let's start a company and let's start another one. Like, it's so easy where you come back here and you're like, What do I need to do? How do I start?
How many forms do I need to fill out to
Yes,
make this
and I have
happen?
to wait for this to even join a gym. I can't join a gym.
Oh
What do you mean?
no.
So it's
Oh
little
gosh.
things. But the thing is, those are little things, and I feel like life had prepared me for all of that. But I think the bigger things are the ones that, like my community's gone.
Hmm.
Like my tribe is gone. I had a tribe in the gym. I had like a
Yes.
whole neighborhood of people. We would eat together every week. And now I find myself deep in the mountains. And it took me, I landed on January 1st, and on the 2nd, I became ill, and I had the worst
Oh
flu
my
I've ever
gosh.
had in like 10 years. And I
Oh,
just
that's what I'm
laid,
getting over is a
oh yeah,
flu. It's terrible, isn't it? Getting sick in your midlife is also not a joke.
no,
So,
it's not.
oh my gosh, you
But,
landed and 2 days later. That would be awful.
and I laid there and I'm like, oh my God, I have nobody. I don't even have a home. Like I'm in a vacation rental at that point, and I'm like, oh my God. But like now in hindsight, I know it was the universe saying, okay, you've had so much stress over the last 6 months, like trying to dissolve everything and start over, that you think you can just jump right back in and pick up where you left off. We're
Hmm.
going to stop you right here now. So I laid there for 5 days. First 2 days, I was crying on and off. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I was like, okay, this is just what I need to do. I need to finally give my body a break.
Hmm.
And once I settled into that, I was fine. I listened to the snowfall. I'm like, it's okay. Just quiet it all down, and you have the rest of your life to figure this out. So
Yeah,
it's okay.
exactly. Yeah.
So,
And I've heard you say that in a couple different ways. Like, it sounds like one of your superpowers is just to kind of let it happen. Kind of,
mhm,
just look for what I will talk to my listeners about just what's the next right step. We don't have to have
right,
it all figured out and know the 20-step plan. We just
right.
have to kind of deal with what's right in front of us but give us grace, give
Yes.
ourselves the ability to just let it all go and just do the thing that's in front of us. And you do that quite well. It sounds like even in these really difficult times, like your recent move.
I think it's because I've experienced so much crazy stuff in my life, from, like infertility and cancer and a home invasion where I got beat up, and like
Oh my gosh.
all kinds
Wow.
of crazy things, that these things now are like, okay, you're
It's the
sick.
flu. I'll be
Oh
okay.
well, it's fine. Just lay here.
Yeah.
It's you don't sweat the small stuff anymore. And I,
Hmm.
I think that's something that only happens over the years, as life goes on, and you like experience and you grow a thicker skin, and it's just not a big deal anymore.
Right.
I just came back today from Athens. I just spent the last 5 days in Athens with my daughter
Nice.
and her roommate. And it was an experience because I haven't had so much intense time with two 20-year-olds in a long time. And
Yes,
the
I'm sure.
drama that comes with that, and
Yep.
everything is a problem, and there's tears. And I'm like,
Oh,
what?
wow.
Oh my God. Wait a second. Okay, this is not a big deal. And they're like, what? And I'm like, okay, I think this is where life has kind of done its job
Hmm.
to like see things from a different perspective when
Yeah.
you're in your 50s versus when you're in your 20s,
In your
So
20s. Exactly. It mellows us out. It just makes us a little bit more like we can roll with the punches now. We
but
can
then
roll.
again, I think it's not just an age thing. I think it's also people who really haven't experienced a lot of challenging things. They seem to deal with
Mm-hmm.
things differently too. Like the people I work with, my clients or my friends, when I told them, you know what, I'm going to give it all up, all of it, and I'm going to go to Europe. And they had about 20 questions to me. How are you
Oh,
going to
I'm
deal with
sure.
this? How are you going to do that? And the end result, like, I didn't even have to answer. I just sat there and I'm like, mm-hmm. And then at the end, they were like, well, you're going to come back. This is not going to work. And I'm like, I said, listen,
I mean,
I,
thanks for the vote of
yeah,
confidence.
they're like, well, their big thing was nobody ever leaves California. So,
Oh,
and I'm like, and they were like, oh, nothing is as beautiful as California. And I'm like, I don't think so. You go to Italy, you go to Greece,
yeah,
like you can
yeah.
hang there for a while. It's
Uh-huh,
okay. This
uh-huh.
is not so bad. So, but my big argument was like, listen, I don't have all the answers. I cannot answer all these questions, but I'm comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, I feel like I'm going to take this first step and then I'm going to take the next step and the next
Yeah.
one. And I feel like, because they were like, what if it's not going to work? And I said, what do you mean it's not going to work? Of course, it's always going to, life always goes on. And I might gain new perspectives where I'm like, you know what? In a year from now, or 3 years, or 5 years from now, I'm going to be like, you know what? I'm going to come back to California because I said, this is not about leaving California. This is
No.
about me wanting a change and exploring the countries that I've been looking to explore and spend some
Yeah.
time with my daughter and spend some time with my parents who are getting up there. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like if I don't do this now, I'm going to regret this. So
Mm-hmm.
I said, it's not about leaving California and it's not going to fail because whatever it is, it's going to be an experience and it's going to guide me to the
Yes.
next place.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't have that fear of failure. I just
Yeah.
don't. I don't look at it that way. And I
Have
think
you ever had a fear of failure? Is that something you earned with wisdom and experience, or is that just kind of one of the, aspects of your own temperament, do you think?
I don't know. I was brought up very German,
Mm-hmm.
very like, what, you don't have homework? Well, study ahead. Like, you always got to progress. You always got to become better, learn
Mm-hmm.
more,
Mm-hmm.
and beat the competition. And I feel like, and early on, I was told that you're never really going to amount to anything. Just
Wow.
get
Ish.
married and just, the funny thing is, I never got married, but I'm happy the way I figured out life. And when I think back, and I sometimes tell my clients that, I said, when I hit rock bottom back then, and I sat on that park bench in Toronto, and I had nowhere to go and nowhere to sleep, and I had this idea in my head and this dream that one day you're going to earn a business and you're going to employ people and you're going to employ women. And like, I had this I could sit there and just daydream of what this is going to
Yeah.
feel like. And honestly, there was never a single doubt in my mind that wouldn't work out. Like, I was never afraid for myself that, oh my God, what if this doesn't work out? Now I look back and I'm like, I was 19. My kids
Yeah.
are 20. If they were sitting on a park bench, I'd be like, oh my God, let me send you some money.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be worried about them. But I was never worried about myself. Like, and
Mhm.
it's not that I had great confidence either. I didn't, but I just had faith in the process that
Right.
it's going to be fine. One
It's
way or
going to be
another,
okay.
it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure that your strong, like, work and progress ethic of what
Right.
you grew up in contributed to that in great part. But there is just something I think that's magical in all of us that kind of, it's our magic sauce. And it sounds like one of your, magic sauces is that you just will kind of sit and say, well, what's the next thing? And you're dreaming and you don't couch that, you don't squelch it in any way. And that's great. I mean, it's really, it's definitely benefited you being a multipreneur across your lifetime. Why don't you share with my listeners here kind of what is your business now? What are you doing now? And maybe that's changed since your move. I'm not sure. Let us know.
No, it really hasn't
No.
changed. It's
No.
see,
This is what I love about being a coach. You can do it anywhere.
and that's the thing. Like, some people now say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky with what you're doing, with the travel you're doing." And I was like, again, this has nothing to do with luck. I really strategized this, and my goal was, at this point in my life, once my kids are off on their own, I want to travel. I want to
Mhm.
go see the world. I want to explore. I love exploring other cultures, other religions, like the spirituality. Like, this last 5 days in Athens, oh my God, that was mind blowing for me about philosophy and like to really dive deep into that. So,
Mhm.
but it's not luck. I have planned for that. And
Yes.
the business. So my last business I sold in June, it was the latest company I had was an e-commerce business. And so I sold that. And while this was on the tail end, I already started coaching other people.
Mhm.
Back then it was really mainly business coaching. I helped other women mainly in the entrepreneurial endeavors.
Yeah.
And I got certified too because I was like, oh, maybe I should do that, even though I've been coaching for a while, but just to have it. So and that
Yeah.
was kind of fun. And then as luck has it, I was introduced to a producer. And when he heard a little bit of my story, he said, you know what, we should do a sample recording. We should do a podcast. And I said, oh my God, I always wanted to do a podcast, but I didn't know
Yes.
how. So I started with him and, oh my God, it was like the greatest bliss for me too.
Isn't it fun? I
amazing.
enjoy it. You know?
Yes. I would have never thought like getting the content ready for the podcast I do, because right now I just do them on my own. And then the recording, which I didn't know I had a voice for that, but
Yes,
oh
you
my
do.
God, I do.
Very
Wow.
much so. Yes. Hmm.
And from there, then somebody listened to me and then approached me and said, oh my God, you should write a book. And I said, oh my God, I always wanted to write a book. Okay. It's really, and that's what another big thing I've learned in life is
Yeah.
when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And
Yeah.
and it sounds so cheesy, but it's so true.
But it's so true. It really is. I mean,
Right.
I think everything is our teacher is also kind of true. And
Yes.
so you're right. It's kind of the link between when I'm ready to see it, then I see it. And
Right.
if you're ready to see it and grab it, then, the opportunity is there for you.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we just need to be open and
Mhm.
without any push and pull, without trying to force it. And at that point, I really didn't. I was like, I'm going to be free. Maybe I'm just going to lay around for a change. I've never done that. But
Yeah.
then this came in and both things, the podcast and the book, turned into the greatest bliss for me. And I was like, oh my God, and for a while now, completely focused on that. I published my first book in September, and now I'm writing on my second book. And then I had a little thing with cancer again, so I had to take a little break. But the podcast has been going every month now. I mean, weekly, we drop weekly episodes,
Mhm.
and I haven't even figured out how to market this or do any of that. Like, but I'm
It'll
like, I
come.
don't care. You know what?
Yep.
Somebody is going to show up and say, hey, I can help you with this. Good. Right
Good.
now, I just want to focus on my joy. And,
Yeah.
that's another thing. Like, I feel like at this stage in our lives, and that's for me, it's such like a pivotal change. Like the previous half of my life, I feel like there was so much was fear driven of like, oh my God, you got to provide for yourself. You got to provide for your children. You got to
Yeah.
pay the bills. You got to do this. You got to do that. There was so much fear driven that this chapter for me, the big headline is it's all joy driven. If you don't
Yeah.
enjoy it, you're
I
not
love it.
going to do it.
I love it. And I think that's such a powerful message for, people in midlife and women in midlife in particular, because I think a lot, at least in American culture, there's a lot of social conditioning around you're going to be a parent and you're going to be, serving and caretaking. You're going to be a partner or a spouse and you're going to be caretaking there. And even the kinds of jobs that we're kind of encouraged to look into, nursing and teaching and things of that
Mhm.
nature, all have that kind of service driven piece to them. And not to say that you can't find joy in service, but service without another counterbalance of joy in your life, which we're not taught well, turns into burnout is what it turns
Yes.
into. And so then people do kind of hit midlife in almost a crisis kind of skidding in way, which looks different for women than it does for men. It's not going out and buying sports cars or something like that. It's like you're just done. You're just done with the life you've been living. And it feels like this big secret that you don't like your life and you don't want to talk to the coaches or the therapists or anybody else about it. And so I love that you're, focusing on that group of people, because I think that we really need to lift this group of women up. And I am excited that in entrepreneurship that you're doing that, like your business coaching, because I think that we haven't even scratched the surface of what these women could be offering us globally.
But that's the thing. For me, it's so interesting because, and you asked me if it changed over the last few months. And
Yeah.
at first I'm like, oh no, nothing changed. But actually it all changed now that you say that,
Yeah.
because originally I thought, oh, I'm going to coach business to women, or people who want to start their own business. But what has happened over the last 6 months is, women, but actually more men now
Mm.
contact me, especially on LinkedIn, and say, I need your help. And it has not failed. Every single person I've talked to, it seems like originally this is a business coaching situation, but within like one or two conversations, it crystallizes itself out. Wait a second. The problem isn't your business. The problem, as if there's a problem, but what we actually need to talk about is what's going on in here.
In here. Yes.
So all of that has changed. And then the beautiful thing is once we become whole in here, the business is thriving.
That stuff follows. Yes, I agree.
It all falls
completely.
into place. And the thing is, I feel like, and so at first I wasn't even focusing on midlife people. I'm like, no, it's just business coaching, right? But then it somehow evolved and it really became so clear to me. I'm like, wait a second, these are all people in midlife who are at the same turning point where the road's kind of like, okay, what am I going to do now? Where am I at? Who am I?
Yeah.
And I realized that midlife has such a horrible rep. It's like, oh my God, everything goes downhill. The physical, the relationships, parents die, children leave. Everything is so negative. But oh my God, you know what? There's so much beauty and joy in that.
And ability to liberate yourself from other people's opinions of what you should be doing. I think that's really, when you go back to the joy piece, like what I try to help link up is if you've lived a programmed or conditioned existence until now, the biggest joy that you can give yourself is to give you a big permission slip to say, screw it all. Like, I don't have to do it because that's what I should be doing. I'm just going to do what I'm choosing to be doing. And so there's this really, it's just enjoyable aspect to coaching this group of people because they have wisdom and whatever they're going to do in business and whatever else you're going to coach them on, they know how to do it. I don't need to coach them on that. They've got that wisdom. I just need to help them with that permission slip to liberate themselves to go, oh yeah, I just get to do whatever I want to do. Yes. I'm going to sell all my stuff and I'm going to move to Europe. Woohoo. That is what's so amazing, I think, about that group of people.
Yeah, because there's freedom in this. And they're really, something really cool. On my flight to Athens a few days ago, I sat down and there was this older man sitting next to me and we got into conversation and it turned out he was I asked him after a couple of minutes, I'm like, who are you? What do you do? And he said, I'm a seeker. I said, a seeker as in seeking what? And he said, the answers to life. And I said, oh my God, of course I had to sit next to you.
Of course.
Oh my God.
Of course the universe would put us next to one another.
I'm like, I have 2.5 hours with you. Oh my God. It was the most blissful 2.5 hours on a plane I've ever had. And the big thing that came out in the end, he said, do you know what the most important thing in life is? And for me, it was like, it's love, it's joy. And he said, no, it's not.
No.
I said, really?
I'm all ears. I need to know.
He said, it's choice. When we realize that we have choice, we choose love, we choose bliss, we choose joy.
Yeah.
And he said, but it takes time to get to that place to realize I can choose how I feel about this situation. I can choose how I respond to this situation. I can choose whether I want this relationship or not. There's choice in all of this. And I was like, oh my God, I can't.
No, that is brilliant. That is because you're right. Or he's right. It's really it's that layer underneath that is so pivotal in being able to choose whatever it is that you want, to choose your joy, right?
And I think that's exactly what you're saying. It's liberating. When we realize that midlife, oh my God, it's liberating. There's freedom that comes with this. The shackles come off and you can do whatever you want.
Right.
You realize at midlife, I have choice. Oh my God. It's like it opens up the world,
It does. It really does.
Yes.
But it can feel like everything is ending. And to just name, and go
Right.
back to what you were saying earlier, like there's the ending of, children moving out, or, careers looking the way that they had up until that point, or your body isn't quite doing what you want it to
Right.
do anymore, as you're going through hormonal changes and things that are just natural. So it can, if you get focused on that level of things, then it feels like it's an ending to a bunch of stuff. But I truly believe the opposite. I'm much like the fellow that was sitting next to you. I would like to help people see the choice, help them make empowered decisions to kind of liberate themselves from all those rules and say, hey, nope, the world's your oyster. Do what you want with that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the key to that is, because I agree, that's a very difficult step to take, because our minds have been programmed to work in a certain way. And I see this like in myself and adjusting to my new life, where I realized like a week ago, before I left to Athens, I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get all these hours in? How am I going to write all this? How am I going to do all that? I need to hire more people. And I'm like, oh my God, wait a second. You have changed locations, but your mindset has stayed the same. You are still that LA girl sitting in a mountain. We need to change that. But to take that step on your own, I think is very difficult. And I actually now have hired a local coach to say, I want you to join me on this journey and help me with this. So, and I think that's where people like you and I come in, who have had the experience with it, who have the perspectives of this, and say, let me guide you on this. Let me show you the way, and you can choose how you're going to live that chapter of your life.
Right.
And I really truly believe, even as a coach, like, yeah, I have all the answers. I can help other people, but we can't help our own mind, because our own mind has gotten us to where we are today successfully.
Yes.
So how are we going to rewire this on our own? So we're not meant to do this alone. We are meant to do this with people who are a step or two ahead of us. And
that's a good point. Yeah.
Right. And it's not just like having friends, like, okay, but most of us get together and we'll all cry together. I'm like, oh, the hormones this and the hot flash is that. And we all like feel sorry for each other. And no, that's not it. That's not going to get us anywhere. It's the people who are like, come on, let's do this. Let's change the perspective of this, and let's look at it in a different way. And let me guide you a little way on this journey. And you'll see, it's just, I mean, but the people who have worked with me are like, oh my God, somebody said to me yesterday, she said, you're an angel. Oh my God, I could have never done this on my own. And I'm like, yes, oh my God,
exactly.
And that's what it's all about, like to help each other shine the light and say, look at, do you see this?
Yes. And what I really love about that is the idea of the community piece. Like, we're not meant to do it alone. And so it's on both sides. Like, we're getting coached ourselves because we want to keep seeking and growing and expanding ourselves. So we're looking for people that are a couple steps ahead of us to help inspire us. And there is this gift that we want to keep giving to people that are still kind of behind us a couple steps and lift them into a different space. And it's all of that, right? Happening at the same time. It's that community aspect to it. I really like that. I haven't ever really articulated it that way, but you're right. I think that there's just a gift in kind of having access to people in different spaces, readiness for change, on both sides of you.
For sure, for sure. And it's such, like, for me, it's such joy, such bliss to to talk to you about this, and knowing that somebody's going to listen to this and it's going to help them to move on in their journey a little bit further. And the other thing I think we need to remember is that taking this path is not an easy path. And there's moments, I mean, like I said, when I got here, I laid in bed and I cried. But then I remind myself and I'm like, okay, if this weren't difficult, I wouldn't be growing. Nothing would have
Right.
changed. If I didn't
Exactly.
want to be crying, I'd be sitting in LA in my nice house, knowing a ton of people. And at the same time, well, I would cry because I'd be like, oh my God, this is it. Like, but you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
growth is difficult and it's
Growth is
supposed to
difficult. Mm-hmm.
hurt a little and it's supposed to be challenging and it's supposed to make us cry. But then I have at least trained my mind at this point to say, oh, this sucks,
That's
right?
what that is. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
good.
Right. Like I'm
Okay.
doing it right. Okay.
Yes.
I'm feeling uncomfortable. I need a good
Mhm.
cry, but that means I'm doing it right because if I wasn't growing, I would feel comfortable and like same. That's
Right.
not what I want here. I want different. So it's going to feel kind of uncomfortable on the journey for
Right.
sure.
And so I tell people, I am not telling you, oh my God, this is so easy and look what I'm doing. And I'm also not telling people, you need to do what I'm doing. You need to just leave your whole life behind. No,
No.
there's a ton of little steps you can take instead
Yes.
of taking this massive leap that I took. That was my choice.
Yeah.
But you don't
Yeah.
need to do that. You can take little steps and make these changes and implement those changes. And even those at times they're uncomfortable and they're like, I don't know, I'm not sure. But no, keep pushing through this. I actually today, while I was driving back, I flew from Athens to Lugano and dropped off my daughter, and then I drove back from Lugano to the German Alps, and I had to drive through the San Bernardino Pass and then a tunnel, and it's a 6.6 kilometer tunnel, and it's so I was like, oh my God, this is like life. You drive through this tunnel. And it's uncomfortable because it's so narrow. There's trucks going both ways. There's only one lane each way. And for me to think about, oh God, if something happens in here, if there's a fire, like it can freak me out.
Yeah.
But so it's like life, you know, you go through this and at some point you're like, oh my God, how much longer is this? Am I doing the right thing? Like, really? Like this is that much longer? And you keep questioning yourself, but you know, you gotta push through this. And that's just like with the challenges. And then all of a sudden you see a little light at the end of that tunnel and the light gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And, you know, and then you come out and usually with these mountain tunnels, you know, like you have a completely different landscape on the other side. And it's so beautiful. And that's exactly what we need to do during midlife, you know. Like, push through these changes.
Push through this tunnel. Yeah. And
stay,
you'll be kind of birthed essentially into a new journey and into a new beautiful landscape like you're talking about. You're right though. I think, you know, one of the biggest differences is we don't know it's only 6 kilometers. So for some of us, it's, you know, that long. And for some of us, it might be twice of that long in the tunnel portion of this journey. And so again, that to go back to what you shared with us in the very beginning, I think just accepting, like, I'll just do the next right thing in front of me, and trust in this process because the process has not failed since I was 19. It hasn't failed. Like, I don't get to know what's on the other side of the tunnel and what it's going to look like, but I believe that I'm going to get to the other side of the tunnel if I keep just plodding along.
There's the resilience and the consistency that stays, you know, like that's okay. Keep doing it, keep pushing. And, it's a beautiful journey. And it's like not knowing can be scary, but it can also be beautiful. I said to somebody the other day, I said, for me to not know where I'm actually going to end up, because I know this is not my final destination. Like this is beautiful right now and I love it. But this is not my final destination. I am renting a furnished place because I want to tie myself down. I want to do traveling and, you know, all the things that I want to do. And I don't know. I don't have the answer. But for me, it feels like, you know, a little kid when you know Christmas is coming, but you're little, you don't really know what that means, like in 3 days or 5 days or whatever it is, right?
I know.
But that's like, I feel like I'm back to that. I'm like, oh my God, I am so excited.
I'm excited. Yes. I don't know when it's going to happen, but something great is coming. Yes, absolutely. And that mindset really does change that, right? Like it's
Yes.
when you're looking for something great to happen, that's what you'll find. If you're looking for, this is terrible, it's all different, I'm scared, that's what you're going to see. Like if you tell your brain to see negative things, it'll see negative things. If you
Right.
tell your brain to see positive things, it will look and ferret those out. But your brain is it's going to do what you direct it to do. So that mindset piece is key there.
And the other thing is also, like you said, I'm looking for something great to happen. But the thing is, like, you take your focus off that. Like, it's when people ask me, they're like, what is going to be next? I don't know. It's so exciting, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, I don't think about this. I'm not like,
Right.
oh my God, where am I going to be in a year from now or 2 years or 3 years from now? I don't think about that because for me, and that's something that really has shifted, is I am actually now enjoying this journey. I look at every day, like today when I was driving back, I'm like, oh my God, this is so magnificent. This is so beautiful. And I realized I'm not thinking about like the future. I'm not doing that anymore. And I'm also not worried about the past. Like I am not questioning myself and whether I'm capable of this or, oh my God, are you going to be okay with this? No, none of this matters anymore. It's really, and I know it sounds cheesy, like, oh, and you got to enjoy the journey and not the destination. But all of a sudden, all of this wisdom is starting to make sense.
Yeah.
It's
it's all kind of funneling together. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that you're right though. I mean, present moment is all we have. Really, when you think about the grand scheme of things, we only have control in the here and now. So you want to enjoy the process of getting a place, not necessarily be so I call that like destination fatigue when we are just looking for, then we don't want to get up in the morning. We don't want to be working on it because we don't know when it's coming. But if you can enjoy the tunnel as well as you enjoy the landscape on the other side of the tunnel, that's magic. Like that's where you want to be. You want to be in the moment with life and love life as it is, no matter what's in there.
And I think there's an awareness that comes with that when you try to shift your mind, and say, okay, I want to rewire this. So when I started driving, I was like, okay, 3.5 hours, I'll be there. And I was like, power, power, power. And then it occurred to me, like, oh my God, all these little villages. Oh my God, wouldn't it be cool to stop and explore and maybe stop for a coffee? And at first, my first response to that, no, you have 3.5 hours to get there. And I'm like, there's nobody waiting for me. What am I doing? Like, why am I so focused on getting there? It doesn't matter. And then I actually pulled off the Autobahn and I just started driving into this town. I'm like, let's look for a really nice coffee place. You haven't had your coffee today. I'm like, oh my God, this is so different than what I used to be like,
Yeah.
But I think that's part of trying to rewire my brain and say, go, who cares when you get there? I mean, I was looking forward to talking to you, but I knew I had hours between that, so it didn't really matter. I'm like, but that's having that awareness for and saying, okay, am I doing this on autopilot? Like, because that's how I've always done it. Or wait a second, how can I rewire this and do things that are out of my ordinary, my habitual self?
Yeah, exactly.
And then it becomes so fun. Oh my God.
Yes. And thank you so much because my listeners have gotten a lot of little nuggets of wisdom here in our conversation today. I mean, really, like we've kind of gone through a lot of different things that are key in the coaching program that I use where I do want them to shift out of old ways of thinking and shift their mindset. I knew you'd be a great guest for us because we had so many things in common. Please share with my listeners, where would you like them to find you online?
Okay, so I have a website called thepowerlifecoach.com. And there's also links on there to my podcast where I really share this entire process over the last year, pretty much, and how I got to this point of actually making that choice and then the process I'm going through. And I'm very raw and authentic, as you can see. Like I share the ups and downs of all of this. And so My podcast is on there. My podcast is called The Power Life, and
Mm-hmm.
you can find it on all the major platforms, and you can listen to that. And then really, and that was part of choosing joy. I was trying to do all the different social media, and I realized I don't like this. I don't like
Yeah.
being on Instagram. I don't like being on TikTok. And it's really not my audience either. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
settled in very happily on LinkedIn. So
Okay.
I'm
Great.
on LinkedIn as Sabine Schoepke and share a lot of my stuff on there too. And
Great.
so
We'll make sure in the notes to today's episode that there's links for all of that, your website and your LinkedIn and the podcast, because I did have a chance to listen to a couple episodes, and I know my listeners will really enjoy your podcast is very similar to how I started when I was a talking head, is what I used to call it, and
Yes.
just giving advice. And this year I switched it up. So my second season is much more bringing experts to my listeners so that they can explore other people's great wisdom, because honestly, there's just not an end to what people can learn and continue to personally develop in their midlife and beyond. So, yeah,
I agree with you. And I think that's what I want to do when I grow up.
Yeah, exactly.
When I get a little time under my belt and get other people to join me on the podcast, and maybe we can have another conversation then.
Yes,
awesome.
I would lovely. I would love to join you on your podcast and have a conversation with your listeners. Yes. So thank you so much, Sabina, for being here on Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving. We've really enjoyed hosting you today.
Thank you so much. Thanks. I really enjoyed it too.
Yes.
Wow. Right. I mean, I'm so glad that I wandered into her and was able to have Sabine Schoepke on today as a guest. She really is a wealth of wisdom that all of us really, not just those of us in midlife and not just women, but all of us could use a little Sabine Schoepke in our life to urge us on, especially during those really dark moments, those tunnel moments, right? I think that what she shared was some really valuable ideas of sometimes we just have to let go and be part of the process, be in that here and now place, and enjoy the life that we're in, right? See the good of where we are, even when it's a dark, you're not sure where the light at the end of the tunnel space is. Because if you're not doing that, if you're not figuring out how to enjoy the tunnel, then you're getting into that destination fatigue that I've talked about on the podcast before. You're getting into that idea that I'll feel better when I get there, when I, fix this problem, when I get the career, when I whatever. And that's really part of what dissatisfies us in midlife so much, is that we bought into that in culture. We bought into that idea of the destination is going to be, this place where I arrive and I'm finally there. And this is a worn story that does not work. We believed it. We stayed committed to it. And in midlife, we're realizing, oh, it doesn't really work this way. So I hope that some of this wisdom that Sabina was able to impart this during today's podcast, that this is going to be valuable to you on your journey, because I really want you to be able to take some of these nuggets of wisdom and enter into a more centered life, thriving. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these 2 crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741 to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.